It has been a very long time that I've been waiting to have this conversation. In fact, I was going to say it's been months, but it's been over a year since I've been trying to get Roger on the podcast. And I finally did it. And let me tell you, he did not disappoint. During this conversation with Roger Horrocks, who needs absolutely no introduction, I asked a variety of questions that led into conversations about how Roger got into the industry, how he changed his career halfway through his 30s, and something that has always been fascinating to me, being a wildlife filmmaker, and I'm sure is the same for anyone listening to this podcast. I'm sure you feel the same way, that when you watch wildlife documentaries, in fact, probably any type of filmmaking, you try and work out how the story's been put together, how the footage has been put together, the timeline of filming, and really just how the process of production went into getting that story to be told. And that was something I specifically asked Roger, because when I was watching my Octopus Teacher, I noticed there's a lot of footage of Craig diving with the octopus and obviously filming himself and filming the octopus himself. But then there are scenes where he's being filmed, and I could only imagine those were two separate occasions. And so I always wondered how that was put together. And Roger goes into depth about that exact thing, how that show was made, where the footage came from, how it was filmed, etc. And it's a fascinating conversation, as well as many other things, including advice. And it's just a fantastic conversation. A little point me telling you any more about it, because you're going to hear it from the man himself, Mr. Roger Horrocks. Hi, Roger. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be on the podcast. How's it going?
No, it's going great. And just really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Well, Roger, let's get into this by talking about how you first got into the industry, kind of your path, that led you to where you are. I know I was looking at your website, it's like 15, 20 years ago or so. Where did it really all start for you? I mean, from the point where you knew that you wanted to get into wildlife filmmaking, was that early on, or was that later on after you had done some stuff?
No, it was much, much later on. So when I, was in South Africa at school, which was like in the 80s, there was it was lawyer, doctor, accountant, engineer. There was being a photographer, let alone being a wildlife cinematographer, just certainly wasn't on my radar. And that was partly because, South Africa was quite isolated at the time. I kind of gravitated more towards a profession. So my intention was to become a lawyer. I studied law and philosophy at university. But at university, I discovered spearfishing. I'd always grown up in the ocean and, close to the sea, life-saving, all that kind of thing. Discovered spearfishing when I was 19. And I just became utterly obsessed. So, to the point where I didn't go into law. I registered to do a master's degree in philosophy, but spent my entire time spearfishing. And of course, never graduated.
Right.
So that was kind of, and I'll get back to that, but that spearfishing for me was quite seminal. Obviously I couldn't make a living out of it. So I pivoted into teaching and lecturing at university, and then actually got into around about 96, I got into multimedia. So I don't know if you recall it all, but there was Macromedia, Authorware, Director, all of these software tools that were still very much desktop publishing. It was really just before the internet came out. But when the internet did hit, I had all those skills, and I basically got into the interactive industry in South Africa and kind of helped to drive the whole adoption of the internet from like 97 through until about 2005 in corporate. So I actually worked in a Fortune 500 company and was very much in the corporate space for 10 years.
Oh, interesting. And so what was that jump then that then led you from that corporate world into wildlife filmmaking?
Well, I think it was, I've always been a very competitive person. Sports, I love sport. I love track and field. And um, I think, I got to, and I think I had that similar approach with work where, I wanted to become an executive and I jumped in and I really applied myself and I actually did relatively well. And then I suddenly got to a point, this was when I was about 36. And, I was a senior executive in a Fortune 500 company. And I just realized like, I don't want to do this anymore. I actually did an executive MBA at UCT, University of Cape Town. And that's what made me realize that I just didn't want to be in a corporate, because what I realized was that an MBA trains you to manage complexity. And I just thought, you know what? I just want to make my life simple. I don't want to, I'm not cut out to manage complexity.
Yeah. I'm the same.
I just, and suddenly that realization. So I was very clear about what I didn't want to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but having that kind of negative space, you don't want to be in that space, was very liberating. So I resigned. And the amazing thing is that when you do resign, suddenly these opportunities come at you.
And how old did you say you were then?
36.
36, okay.
Yeah, 36. So, and this is where I get back to the spearfishing, because, I had a network of great spearfishing friends, one of them being Mark Addison, who was he was like a pioneer of scuba diving in South Africa.
Yeah.
And through him, I managed to get work on Nature's Great Events for Hugh Pearson, which was, one of their landmark series. Came out in, I think, 2008 or 2009. And I worked on that series, and that's where I met Justin McGuire, Didier and Warrow, became great friends with them, and basically became an apprentice to Didier. And that's when the whole thing became, wow, okay, this is something fantastic and, something I'd really like to pursue and become world-class at.
That's cool. So what was the first job you were actually doing when you got in there? What was the first thing that you were doing? Were you assisting?
It's quite a cool story. Normally the researcher or someone would come out. Obviously on these shoots they try and use staff as much as possible, but they'd send the researcher to do a lemming shoot, which actually got cancelled. But fortunately, I'd been contracted, and the job was to actually work a perfect horizon and a photron. I don't know if you're familiar with either. Remember the photron?
The photron? No, I don't.
So the photron is like the precursor to the Phantom Flex.
Oh, yeah. High speed, super high speed camera. Yeah,
so like this little module that connected to a laptop, and because I had digital background and, those skills, I kind of ticked all the boxes. And that was my job really, was to do two things. One, it was to manage the photron and essentially the DIT. And the second job was there were no, Cineflexes and things at that time. And we had a thing called a perfect horizon, which is, it's like, it uses like stable gyros, but external gyros. We basically, so my job was to sit and look at two little spirit levels and sort of be the human brain component of this thing to help it, because it certainly wasn't perfect.
Sure.
So that was my job.
That's fantastic. But that's perfect, because it's one of those things that shows that your background, although it had nothing to do with filmmaking, there you were able to get in, and you kind of ticked all the boxes for being able to understand the technology, be there, understand the digital download side of it and what have you. And I think that's what's so exciting about this industry, is that we all, my background was wildlife. I came from running a wildlife park, so I knew nothing about cameras and what have you. But that was my superpower, right, for getting into the industry. And I think we all have that in some way.
It's a really good point. And, increasingly, and I'm sure you have it, you get people asking you, especially youngsters coming through, like, what can I do? And my advice often is, don't just be patient, because generally it does take a bit of time to get in. And there tends to be a preference for slightly older camera operators, although that definitely is changing with the newer technologies. But, build those like key skill sets that make you viable, because there's many ways into the industry. And if you can have one thing that differentiates you, like, being excellent at driving boats or being a specialist in one specific thing, often that's how you get in, and then you build relationships, right? And then it just all blossoms from there.
Absolutely. And as you say, that could be anything from being able to captain a boat to ride an ATV or a snowmobile, or just having those extra skills that come in so handy when you're in a small crew out in the wilderness. If you can, I think it was Sir David Attenborough who said, the best skills he ever saw on a cameraman was being able to fix an engine, right, on a car. Because when you're out in the remote area and, your car breaks down, you need to be able to fix it and get on and carry on with the production. And just having skills like those things that really set you apart means you can just continue with it rather than the whole thing being shut down. That's so very important. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Karen?
No, go ahead.
No, and I think to your point as well, the your background with animals. I mean, the animal component is so critical as well. Is having that affinity, almost not necessarily being a tracker, because you often rely, you have good people with you, but that whole sensibility, and especially underwater, we call it in spearfishing, we call it a fish sense. It's something you develop over a long period of time. Immersion in the water, knowing where to look, when to look. It's this incredible sense of anticipation. Yeah. And, so again, those sort of skills, even though it's not, I wasn't even had any thought of becoming a wildlife cameraman, all of that time spent in the ocean just transferred beautifully into the underwater craft of filming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do, when I'm speaking with people, a part of my mentorship, or whether it's someone who's emailed me or someone I've met at a festival, and they say, I'm just coming out of school, I want to get into this, what's the most important thing? I actually do always turn to wildlife and say, look, learning how to act around wildlife and being able to judge whether an animal's a threat or it's just checking you out, all of those things take so much time to learn. That's just experience, time in the field, time with wild animals. Learning to use a camera, I mean, I don't want to say it's an easy thing, but within a few months, you can learn how to use a camera pretty successfully. As long as you just stay with it and learn what you're doing, the technology is much easier to learn than behavior of an animal and different species and how to react in those scenarios so you don't freak them out. I mean, there's no point freaking out behind a camera if an animal's coming towards you, and scaring it off and missing the behavior that may have happened. So Roger, you had your first kind of apprenticeship, then you got into it, you made some connections. What was the thing that made you realize you wanted to do cinematography? Was there any point where you thought, maybe producing, maybe directing, maybe, sound recordist, or was it just like you loved the idea of this and you wanted to get behind a camera?
No, it was, immediately, because then you're in the water, right? So like, that's where I love being. Like, I love being underwater. So for me, funny enough, the first year I actually assisted Justin McGuire. So that was topside. He's one of the greatest long lens wildlife cameramen, I think, in the world. So that was working topside. But then the second year, Hugh switched me to assist Didier. And that really, Didier is a great character. He was Jacques Cousteau's cameraman. Just such an incredible guy to work with. And that really just was like, okay, wow, this is what I want to do. And of course, getting into production, too many emails, too many emails.
Right, that's right. That's true. It's nice to be able to know that you hit record, your job starts, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm getting the chance to intern with Didier and work with Didier. It must have just been an incredible, start to the industry for your career. So you went on now. I mean, there's a long list, right? Our Planet, Perfect Planet, My Octopus Teacher, Blue Planet 2, Touching the Dragon, Into the Dragon's Lair, which I think Craig Foster actually, he was filming those. Was he producing those and filming those, or directing those? Into the Dragon's Lair and Touching the Dragon. And
Yeah,
you
so
worked
that
on those.
was so it's interesting because before I actually met Didier, I actually met Craig and Damon. So Craig and Damon, his brother, the Foster brothers,
Yeah,
they've been making films since, geez, I don't know, I mean, for 20 years. In fact, they won a Golden Panda for their first feature film, which was The Last Dance, about the
yeah,
Bushman hunting. So two incredibly talented filmmakers living in South Africa. And I met them at a film festival. And we sort of connected and actually pitched a few ideas. I was going to be in the film. But then when I went up to the Okavango to help Didier film crocodiles, I came back and I showed them that material and they got a commission off that. And as a result of that, we made a film called Into the Dragon's Lair, which really told the story of Didier trying to, film these crocodiles, Nile crocodiles, deep inside the papyrus. And yeah, I was in the film, and I actually ended up narrating the film, which was an incredible sort of experience. And then we went on to make a sequel in South America, but I was very much, I didn't want to be in front of the camera at that stage. I very much wanted to prove myself as a cinematographer. So I kind of abandoned that whole path and just totally focused on, working with Didier. Then I ended up working with Doug Anderson, assisting Doug, who I would say arguably pound for pound is the best underwater cameraman in the world.
yeah.
And yeah, so that was kind of where I met Craig, Craig Foster.
That's fantastic. So I love the fact that you also just chose to do the one thing, go behind the camera and get it right. Because I think that one of the things, I mean, partly I could say it's great to wear many hats, right? And especially these days where filmmakers, you can be on your own as a filmmaker doing everything, and wearing every hat is what you have to do. But at the same time, to get really, really good at certain things like cinematography, that focus is so unbelievably necessary. And I think that's a great choice, because I think so many people choose, I did a lot of things. I was hosting before I went behind the camera, producing, and it just gets too much. Just gets to the point where you're just scraping by, doing a bit of everything. And then you look back and you go, I really made a mess of that, and so just being able to focus, I think, is so very, very important. And then, get really good, and then maybe move on and focus on something else, so you can just build those skills up. So then, obviously, and I'm messing with the timelines here, I'm sure, but My Octopus Teacher, you worked with Craig again on My Octopus Teacher. Now, how did you work on that? Because I know that he filmed a lot of the stuff with the octopus of his personal interactions, but I know in the movie there's moments where, like, for instance, when I think he has first contact and the octopus starts moving over him, it goes from what looks like him holding a camera to being filmed. Was that you in the water with him at that point, or was that his son with him? Someone else was filming him there. How did that work?
So yeah, it's a great story. So I don't know if you're familiar with in Blue Planet 2, there's an armoring octopus sequence where it's in the Green Seas episode where the octopus, it gets caught out in the open by a pajama shark, and then it manages to escape, and then it basically wraps itself in rocks.
Yeah.
So that is the same animal.
Right. Yeah.
Octopus Teacher. So what actually happened was I got my first kind of break in the industry with John Downer shooting a Spy in the Pod series of filming dolphins. It was just brilliant. I mean, John is one of these great characters of our industry. He's pioneered the whole spy cam and, these hidden cameras. And he just, I mean, can you imagine? It's like 2013. I've just kind of, I've made that decision. I'm not assisting anymore. I want to shoot. And I got this incredible opportunity to do 100 days filming dolphins in Mozambique.
Wow.
I mean, and that I knew was like, this was my big break. So at that time I was trying to get into it. I did all of that. Then off the strength of that, I managed to get some work with Ted Giffords, actually another cameraman who was producing at the time. He gave me my first job for the BBC, and that's a big deal. The first time that you work as a camera operator. So I was sort of developing these blue chip, sort of skills and understanding the language. And then Blue Planet 2 came about, and I still wasn't really on the radar. I wasn't like a go-to camera op.
Sure.
So what I did was I phoned Craig and I said, listen, I'm trying to pitch a story in the kelp forest, because there's a kind of agreement that if you pitch a story, they'll use you in some capacity. It's a kind of gentleman's agreement.
Sure.
So I came up with this idea of the kelp forest and story, but it just wasn't strong enough. So I called Craig. I was actually in Egypt at the time. I called Craig and he said, I've experienced this thing and whatever. So basically we pitched that story to Blue Planet 2 and they picked it up. But because it was such a difficult story to film, and I was so obsessed with what it's like. This is your big opportunity. So I was just like, Craig, we're going to go every day possible and we're going to film this thing. So we spent 2 years filming.
Wow.
And not getting, I mean, there was a kind of agreement of money, but it was very much just off our own back.
Yeah.
And then we submitted, a portion of that, which we obviously got paid for. And then they did a shoot as well of their own, which, obviously we had no rights to, but off that massive archive, we had the material. And Craig at the time wasn't thinking, about making a film. I think that after the sequence did really well, it was one of the sort of more memorable sequences in the series. That's when the idea started to germinate. And that's when he started working with that massive archive of material.
Right.
That we had, collectively shot. And then of course he had so much material of his own. That's that story.
Yeah. So there's a combination there. I was trying to work it out when I watch it. I'm trying to work out, I'm sure you're the same, right? You watch stuff and you're trying to see how it's been put. Did they film that at the same time as that? And trying to work out how it was put together and whether it was all recorded, within that timeline or whether it was at separate times. I mean, the story is incredible because there's not many natural history films where it's really focusing on, kind of mental health like that, and looking at how being in touch with nature just really helped Craig out. And I mean, it's a beautiful story, obviously. That's why it won so many awards and it's as popular as it is. A great project. How has that changed anything for you? Do you think that, I mean, you're already doing a lot of amazing stuff, but that obviously was a point where it was winning Oscars and Academy Awards. Did that make a difference in your career at that point?
I think yes. I mean, yes and no. It's quite a unique format. And since that show, since Octopus Teacher, there's been a massive demand from the streamers for that kind of format. Yeah. Because obviously it did so incredibly well. And I mean, you made a good point. It's not really is it a natural history film or is it more a human drama? It's kind of an archetypal sort of story, but just set in a natural kind of context. So it's not like, I've had hundreds of producers, approaching me, wanting me to shoot similar projects, because there aren't that many of those. They're quite niche and they're quite specific. but I think the recognition that came from that, both from my peers and just the incredible response we got from people was very, very rewarding, personally. I mean, really, we got messages from people, very personal messages, saying how that film had profoundly affected them, and so that was very rewarding. But I think having my name up as the DOP was significant, because in so many of these nature series, there's so many of us that contribute, and your name. So even if you're one of the primary principal cinematographers, there's still 4 or 5 of you, and then there's like another 40 people that have contributed. So it kind of all gets lost, and I mean that's kind of one of the sad things about the industry. Like if you look at the National Geographic photographers, for example, they Paul Nicklin, Tom Peshak, Brian Skerry, they are persona. They're very well-known people, and you can kind of leverage off that. But so many of the, the cinematographers they're just kind of invisible. So it's but as well, I mean, it's such the natural history world, and then the features world, and then the commercials world. They're very, very different sort of spaces.
For sure.
But in short, to answer your question, it has certainly opened up massive opportunities. If I reach out to anyone for that matter, and say, I was involved with this project, there's definitely a lot easier to get in the door than before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you said, just receiving emails and letters from people saying how it's changed their life. I mean, that, we're all in it to make incredible films that touch people, maybe have some impact in their lives, or, grassroots stuff on the ground, like have some change. And however that comes. And I know that, when I was hosting, I would get emails and letters from people who, I was doing an insect show at the time, and it made people go and become entomologists and things like that. And that to me was so powerful. I'm like, this is incredible that something I do that I'm passionate about can have that effect on someone. There wasn't many people, but it was just a few handful of people that made me really realize I was doing something special. And I think, my Octopus Teacher, it as you say, right? Is it a natural history show? Is it a human documentary story? The point is, what it's done is I think it's brought natural history into way more homes than it was before. And that is special. That's really special. I'm finding now when I speak to people, I speak randomly to people, right, about natural history stuff. I'll meet people I'm chatting with, and I'll say, hey, do you watch natural history shows? The amount of people that still don't watch natural history shows is shocking to me. I think because obviously it's my life. And I kind of assume everyone watches natural history, right? It's just one of those things. There's still a lot of people who just aren't interested in natural history at all. And I think My Octopus Teacher has that ability to cross those boundaries, for people to go, wow, I never knew that about an octopus. And this guy being so close and just learning stuff while seeing this human story unfold is incredibly powerful. And I think that, as you say, has led the way for more things like that. Obviously, there has to be the story. You can't manufacture that. I mean, you have to find the story in the first place that's going to work in that format. But I'm eager to see what comes out of that. And I mean, fantastic. I mean, just love that, and love the inside scoop on how that all came together. So you've worked on Planet Earth 3. What was the sequences you filmed on Planet Earth 3?
So what actually happened was. It's a long story. I was assigned to work almost exclusively on Planet Earth 3, but there was a producer change, and I shifted on to working on this big ocean series. So for the whole of 21 and 22, I was exclusively involved. Roger Munns, myself, and Justin McGuire were the sort of 3 principal cinematographers involved in this. So our oceans is going to be like the sort of complementary to Our Planet on Netflix.
Yes. Yes, and I guess I read that you, maybe in your bio, I read somewhere that you were taken on to do some Planet Earth 3, but that's
I,
so interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I did the great white shark sequence that was, with all the sharks and the seals.
And the
I was
seals,
very
yeah.
involved, have been very involved in that. So there was some of my material in that
Okay.
sequence. But
Yeah.
and I got a credit for that, which I probably didn't deserve. But I was kind of involved in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's interesting. I had the same thing happen with a show where, as you say, producers change, different ideas, moving on, doing different things. There's so many people involved in these things now.
Mm.
So where is Roger Horrocks heading with? I know that you're starting cinematography courses. What is your outlook like looking into the next 5 years or so? What do you see yourself doing? Are you branching out to new projects? Are you staying very much cinematography, underwater cinematography?
I mean, it's kind of work in progress, but I think, the beauty of what we do is that you are, you know, you're away and you are absolutely immersed in what you're doing 100%. I mean, you're working, as you know, it's like 18-hour days. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you are fully engaged in that project. And there's, it's 7 days a week, so 21 days straight. When you come home, you've got your own time. So really it's a question of, well, what do you do with that time? And certainly for me, one of the things, I mean, I do work quite a bit on stock. So I've been building a stock library, but increasingly with the whole creator economy and with, just the kind, as you mentioned earlier, the sort of technology we have. Yeah, I'm really excited about taking what I know, this very specific knowledge, because it is specific. It's specific to
Yeah.
my experience, and just trying to articulate that and make that accessible to a much broader audience, through the internet primarily. And it's also, as I mentioned earlier, it's a real desire to reach out and engage and also grow, because I think growth is something that is just, it's like fundamental to the human condition. Like we all want to grow and sort of, you know what I mean? Like be more than we are
Absolutely.
anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a big component. I've started, writing a lot more and trying to get my thoughts, articulated. And we'll see. I'm not 100% sure of exactly where it's going to go, but certainly getting more involved in mentoring and coursework is on the cards. I'm still obviously very passionate about shooting on series. I'm actually off to Greenland next month, so really excited about that. But no, I mean, my passion is cinematography. That is absolutely the passion. It's just finding those complementary things that you can sort of, develop in alongside that skill
Yeah.
set.
No, and that's exactly what I've done. I mean, it's finding the tool, using the tools and the resources you have available to stay within that whole kind of perimeter of what we do of wildlife filmmaking, and something that having hosted got into this industry through hosting. I had a lot of people who would reach out to me, and I realized, wow, there really is, there's nowhere people can turn. The only way people really can find out information, is real information that helps them, is to go to a wildlife film festival and start chatting with people. And we know that costs a fortune these days to make it to wherever they're happening, pay for tickets, and et cetera, et cetera. And I realized that, wow, there really is this passionate people out there who have incredible skills, and whether it's, as you say, whether it's tech skills, whether it's natural history skills, who really want to get into this industry and make a name for themselves, and make incredible content. It's hard. It can be hard to do. Very hard.
No, it's tough. And I think, the other thing which is really interesting is, if you look at what loosely called the creator economy, basically the fact that you've got, multiple distribution channels and things that you can use to build an audience, social media. something I'm also looking at is actually helping more content creators to branch out into underwater cinematography, because it's such a magical sort of space, and to bring that language into your productions or whatever it is, even if it's just splash cams, in and out and moving around, but just to bring that dimension into your videos. So yeah, I think it's a very exciting time for young creatives who have the ability to, express themselves. It's never been a better time, and the cameras now are
Yeah.
just phenomenal. I
Yeah.
listened to a podcast. Oh man, who was the cinematographer? Which was the film? It was Napoleon. So the latest Napoleon film,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
which was directed by
Joaquin Phoenix.
Joaquin is in
Joaquin
it.
Phoenix in it. Yeah, he's
And
Napoleon, right?
it's he's the guy who did Blade Runner, man. What's his name?
Oh, villain.
No, the
Not
producer,
no, not.
the director. Anyway, it'll come to me. But
Okay, yeah, yeah.
they actually used GoPros, or not GoPros. I think they used the DJI or whatever in some of the action scenes. So they'd strap them onto
Wow. I mean, yeah,
strap them onto the stuntmen as they rode through these massive battle scenes. And I mean, they're in the film. It's incredible. So
is
the
that
barriers.
Villeneuve, the director, the guy who did Dune?
No,
Did he do the
not Denny.
second?
It's not Denny. It's man. I can't
Denny.
believe it. I've had a brain fog.
Okay. Yeah,
Can't believe it.
I get that a lot.
He did
The original Blade Runner.
no man. He did. What's his name? This is embarrassing. He did Gladiator. Ridley Scott.
Oh, Ridley Scott. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
incredible.
Okay, so they're using GoPros as action footage in Napoleon. That's incredible.
I'm not sure it was GoPro
Yeah.
or DJI, the DJI Osmo. It might have been
Okay.
the DJI Osmo, but I mean, the point is that, if you look at you look at Mr. Beast, you look at these people that have, literally started producing these shows in their backyard, and then they've just built
Yeah.
this following. It's very democratic, and that's what I'm really excited about, is that, you've got the old school kind of production model where everything has to be vetted. You've got to get a commission. You've got to do X, Y, and Z, whatever. But there's this whole other opportunity, and it's very hard. It's a lot of hard work. And I mean, if you look at people that are running YouTube channels, the dedication and the commitment, I mean, how hard it is to generate this level of content. But such an exciting time for creative, visual, creative, people that can create entertainment, because, attention is the new oil. I mean, that's the saying, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's so true. And as you say, it's not the years ago the barrier to entry was gear, right? I mean, whatever you were doing, whether you were doing a podcast, right, and the microphone was thousands of dollars for a decent microphone, now, everything has come down. Technology is just incredible. I don't think I've publicly said this, actually, probably just to the mentoring group, but I filmed a sequence for Planet Earth 3 of black bears in urban environments. And, one of the biggest questions I get when people know that is, what was the camera? Was it the red, Raptor and this and the other? And when I tell them, they're shocked. Because I use the A7S series a lot because I'm filming in pitch black, right?
Yeah, FX3, man, it's a great camera, isn't it?
Amazing camera. But most of the footage that was used in there was filmed on an A7S Mark I. Right?
Wow.
And that was because it was with a Ninja recorder, so it's filming 4K. It can't film 4K inside. And that's just because I have a whole bunch of them, and I have them set up in different rigs. And it just so happened that particular footage was on the Mark I, and it was filmed in 4K and a recorder. But the camera's incredible, and if you know how to set it up so you don't have all that noise, and then of course you can do post to remove what noise there is, you get incredible footage. The fact that you can use that level of camera on a blue chip series, it says everything, right? And I think The Creator, was it called The Creator, that new movie, the AI movie? Gareth Edwards, FX3.
Yeah.
I mean, what's that? $3,800 camera.
Yeah, and I mean, Octopus Teacher. I was quite involved in the whole. Well, when I say involved, I was part of the grading and got to see a bit part of that. And I mean, the upraising, because we had to upres, right? Because a lot of Craig's material is HD.
Sure. Yeah.
So now you're shooting you're shooting with a small little Panasonic GH Tough. He's gone through all the series, HD, and then, but if the shot's brilliant and it's evocative and it tells a story, you upres it, and I mean all that technology has become quite amazing as well.
For a couple $100, you can upres stuff incredibly well. I've done some testing with standard def. A lot of my early stuff was all standard definition 4:3, and just upresing that to 720 or 1080 is possible, which seems crazy, but it is. Did you guys use Topaz? Or do you have a different?
No, I'm not sure. I think they used like base lights, and they were using sort of high end systems. I don't think Topaz was really like, it wasn't massive then.
It wasn't around then. Yeah.
No, it wasn't really. But I mean, I've used Topaz recently, and it's pretty amazing. Also the frame rates, the creation and things like that.
Mind blowing.
But the camera, I mean, look, it always helps, right? I mean, the great thing about having something like a Red is it's also very forgiving. You can get away with things, and it's astounding, because I mean, digital cameras really are, again, I was listening to another podcast, and guy made the point that digital camera really is it's not really about the look that comes out of the camera. It's about the amount of information it can capture. All the look you can largely work on. Obviously the lens makes a difference, but you know what I mean, you can work on a lot of that in post. But really, I mean, I've just bought an FX3 for doing, a lot of just more the run and gun topside stuff. And it's, it's insane. It's like such a great,
amazing. Yeah. I wish it would, if it had 6K, Sony, if you're listening, a 6K camera. So, I mean, it's so nice to have that resolution just to be able to punch in and get the extra zoom. But I know, I mean, just it now is not the barrier to entry, right? It's not the barrier to entry. Now it's about passion. It's about being consistent. How much can you create? The more you create, I was listening to something the other day, and it was a podcast, a couple of guys talking about quality and quantity. And there used to be the saying, obviously, it's quality, not quantity. But their argument was that you don't really get quality unless you produce quantity, right? The quantity comes first. You've got to create great amounts of content to be able to understand how to build the quality and get better and better. And you mentioned someone like Mr. Beast, obviously a billionaire YouTuber now who started off in his bedroom making terrible videos, who now has budgets bigger than most TV shows for making short videos. Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole kind of creative concept of practice in public. So you literally, instead of trying to create this thing that's just perfect and then put it out into the world, which is kind of the old school model, you just produce. You start, and you start to see, and you look at the analytics and you see what gets traction, and then you do more of that, and you just improve and you improve and you improve, and you know that your first 100 videos are going to be appalling, but the feedback, the loop is so tight. Whereas in our world,
that's right.
It's you've got to be working for like 4 or 5 years, sitting, getting all that feedback from the producers. It's a very different process.
I think patience is still the big key word with all of it. There's got to be patience to build. But as you say, the loop is so much quicker. I mean, you get instantaneous results. If you're releasing a video on YouTube a week, you can start to see exactly what's going on, what made something kick up, why did the other one not. The tools are astounding in terms of what insights we see now. And of course, if you grow up in this world, that's just the norm. For us, we know, I mean, you were talking about a camera is just a device that creates the data and then you can go away. Of course, it never used to be like that. When I think my first digital camera was an HPX, was it? Panasonic had the P2 cards.
Yeah.
And, of course, that thing, you really needed to get it pretty right in camera because there was no latitude.
Exactly. No.
Yeah. You couldn't do anything with it. I mean, like if you blew the highlights, you lost the highlights. Now, of course, you say with Red Raw, you can pretty much bring anything back, and that is astounding. And some, have these conversations where some people think, well, now anyone can do it. Why do we need a Roger Horrocks, right? Anyone can do it. Well, it's not true, because you still need to be able to, one, frame, compose, understand how to capture stories through a lens. I think what it does is we're going to be in this space where lots of people will try and lots of people will fail, and all the people who can do it really well will still be there doing it really, really well, because that's what it needs to tell a good story.
Yeah, and I think it's, we've been speaking across different sort of platforms and things, but clearly each platform has a different style and a different kind of, demand. And I mean, that's really the crux of it. It's kind of like learning martial arts. Like, you've got to learn jiu-jitsu or you practice karate. They're different sort of techniques. Yeah. And I think that's the benefit of having worked on some of these shows for so long, is you learn the language, you learn that specific language. And it's something that you can only really learn. It's a very interesting topic, is can you teach cinematography? Like, can you actually, teach someone to be a great cinematographer? I think you can teach them the techniques and you can teach them the logic. Yeah. But whether they have the magic in them to then, deliver, because it's so interesting, because the magic doesn't lie in the camera. The magic is all in you. It's coming from the nuance of how you move, where you position the animal, it's a dance, right? It's a dance. It is. Yeah. So, I think, shooting for like a YouTube channel, or they're all very, very different skills, and you need to learn the conventions and the nuances and the kind of the language of each one. But it's certainly easier to learn on the internet, because you're getting such quick feedback. Yeah.
No, that was beautifully put. And that's kind of what I was saying, is I think that having that, I think a lot of it is innate. You either, once you learn those skills, you either innately can put them into practice, or you can't. And I have met people who can't, and they know that, and they've tried, and they've learned everything there is about framing and composition and sequencing, but yet they go out on their own and they can't do it. And I think that just comes down to whether or not it just sticks with you and you innately see it as it happens. Because I don't think we really think, I'm sure you don't really you're not thinking, oh, I must put that there, I must do this, I must do that. It just becomes, like you say, a dance of knowing what looks good.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think there's a lot of parallels with, handgun shooting. I mean, if you, give someone who's never shot a handgun, and take a Navy SEAL who's spent thousands of hours training with drills, and I mean, the difference is just like, it's just insane. Yeah. It's night and day, And that Navy SEAL is not, when they go into a room or whatever, they're not thinking really. It's just complete flow state, and it's just, it's been trained into them. And it's the same with, getting onto a bait ball or something where, you've been waiting 3 weeks for this thing. And this was the situation on our planet, 3 week shoots in the Azores, and the entire sequence was shot on a bait ball that lasted 6 minutes. 7 minutes, and just that flow state, and then trying to resolve it, and it's so intense. It's a very emotional, intense experience. You've got that pressure, but that's kind of what I love about what we do, is there's no like second take. I mean, there are in some instances, bench shoots you can, but it's that pressure is insanely addictive.
And I think that is what sets apart the pros from the non-pros, is the ability to keep calm and capture the behavior when it happens, regardless of how long you've waited, and know it, being able to, as you say, do that dance when you need to do that dance. I mean, I think that applies probably to most things that professional people work on, right? It's having the ability to come through when you need to.
Yeah, it's getting the results, it's delivering and getting the results. And also, I think management and managing people. I mean, this is something that I tell a lot of, colleagues that I work with. I mean, there's no real none of the people you really work with have any kind of formal management training, or it's just not done in the industry. I mean, it is to a degree on the producer side, but I was so fortunate to have 10 years of corporate experience where you get sent on courses. You become more aware of, how to manage up, for example, how to manage your, it's not just, if things are going wrong, you don't just sit there. You've got to actually, manage up. So I think all of those skill sets as well are actually very important things. And certainly something I'm going to emphasize when I talk to, people is these are things you can develop before you even get into the industry. And they help so much because, that dynamic on set or on location is just so fundamental to the success.
To everything.
The energy and the passion and it makes such a difference.
I talk about this a lot about, the fundamentals of this industry. One of the things that actually the first ever episode of the podcast was Rick Rosenthal talking about, he filmed the sailfish for Planet Earth. I think it's Planet Earth one, the original.
So that's Planet. Just to jump in. That's when I first saw Doug Anderson. There was a making of, and he was with Rick on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just something, but I remember Doug had a golfing cap on, which I started using, a golf cap, because they don't blow off on a boat.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember there's a scene where Rick goes, "Get in the water, Dougie, get in the water." And every time I see Doug to this day, it's like, "Dougie, get in the water."
Right. That's great. Well, Rick said in his interview, he said that basically, he said, "I don't care what your background is, but if you can come on a boat and get on with everyone and cook some food and have a laugh and do the jobs that you're asked to do and get along, that's what counts, because everything else can be taught." But I mean, I know, when you're in something like a 5-person crew, small crew, traveling the world, you're going to some hardcore places. It's hard on everyone individually. If you're not a team player, it ruins everything. You only need one person to make life hard, and it can be very hard to stay on track.
Yeah, I think as a general rule, I mean, you don't last in the industry if you're not like, you know what I mean? It's like you just get like,
you get kicked out. Yeah.
Out.
Yeah, people, I mean, it's a small industry, right? Everyone, to some degree, has all the same connections. Whether we know each other or not, we're all connected with the same people. It's very easy to get a bad name in an industry like this.
Yeah, and I mean, it's because you did right. I mean, as soon as people they might look at your website, but generally they'll call up, 3 or 4 people you've worked with before, and then like, what's he like to work with? What's she like to work with? What's the story? And as long as there's a thumbs up, then you're good to go. Good. But it's very much it's quite democratic like that.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think this industry, I mean, talking about creators as a whole, I mean, the industry is just changing so fast, right? Broadcast TV really is a thing of the past. Streamers is now, where it's going. And even that is an unsure thing because it's just all over the place. There's going to be some kind of leveling out over the next few years, I'm sure, to see what works, what doesn't. In terms of being, there are a select, there's the kind of cream of the crop of cinematographers like yourself, right, who exist in that broadcast world. Do you think as things change, that's just going to get a much broader, larger group of people? Or do you think there's still going to be a set kind of, top level of people that will be continuously used in the industry? How do you think that plays out? Have you any thoughts on that?
Look, it's obviously very much a demand-driven thing. I mean, we've just seen, we're witnessing at the moment a massive contraction in the industry, right? So there was this, when I first started shooting, I mean, it was kind of like it has been. I mean, there was a little bit of a bump, but it was tough. It was tough to get a gig. Then there was this whole streamer war, with Disney going after Netflix, and just suddenly this, massive injection of money. And now we're seeing a radical contraction back to kind of, so the bubble has burst and it's kind of going back to pre-bubble sort of levels of production. I think, the streamers obviously were just throwing money at formats and trying to work out what works. But you see, the brilliant thing with streamers, which differentiates them to a degree from, broadcast, is that they have all the analytics. So they know exactly what people are kind of watching. And that's going to be interesting as well, because, you're moving from a world where you had so-called, commissioners who are the experts of what people want, making the decisions, right, on what the content should be. Now suddenly you're getting, sure, Netflix still need to decide where the money goes, but they've got such a richer base of like analytics to draw on, And of course the danger is if your general public don't respond to shows, then potentially the investment goes down, right?
For sure, yeah.
But the proliferation of devices, if you look at, I think that's where, I feel very bullish about media in general, because I think, the demand is absolutely going to be there. But I'm very intrigued to see where, because you see a lot of the commissioning decision is moving to the US. It's moving to California. It's Apple. Yeah. It's American broadcasters now that are actually commissioning a lot of what was traditional kind of BBC, David Attenborough style shows.
Yeah, for sure. And of course the BBC have moved to LA as well.
Yeah, I mean,
not moved, but they have opened up BBC studios in LA, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, they are starting to service that international market. But what I'm getting at is that the editorial power is shifting to, the East Coast, right? No, West Coast.
West Coast,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a fascinating time. But, we can only shoot as an operator, I can do 4 sequences a year. I mean, you can't, maybe 5, but I don't want to be away more than 150 days of the year. I just don't. Sure. That's a magic number for me. So, you don't need that much work to sustain you. But, I'm very intrigued to see where it goes. But I do feel very optimistic about the future and the demand for media and the demand for wildlife.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating for sure. I mean, it's been a roller coaster, and of course, with a pandemic thrown in the middle there, it just messed everything up too. So we can't really judge it. There's no default to look at. Going on a personal note, you just mentioned how long you're away from being away from your family. How big is your family?
Well, I've got two girls, and it's a very It's tough. I mean, I think that the key is just to limit the amount of time that you're away. I find I don't like doing back-to-back shoots. It's difficult, right? What was wonderful on contract for Netflix was that, I could kind of choose shoots to have more time at home and factor things around holidays and things like that to a degree. But you are very much at the mercy as a freelancer. You are kind of at the mercy of that. You've got to get those days in.
That's right.
Otherwise, it's problematic. And that's also why I think it's so important to develop, your business acumen so you can have multiple. You need at least, in South Africa, we have a thing called a potjie, which is like a 3-legged pot.
Okay.
So, I don't know if you know, but I mean, you kind of need, your stool needs 3 legs. Like you need 3 sources of income. So I've got
a great way of looking at it.
Fine art prints that I market, and so it's all starting to come together. But I mean, still by far the most, the primary source of income is my cinematography. But managing the family and the lovely thing is that when you're home. You're like, I'm not going to the office.
Sure.
I'm sure there are businessmen that actually spend more time away traveling to another city than I do.
Yeah.
It's just
that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
I'm kind of away for blocks of time, and you just got to have a partner who understands that. And but they get used to it as well, and
they might like it.
Yeah, exactly. It's going away.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, we've got a few days. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's such a great way of looking at it, because I think even, for anyone there's a couple of things here. When you're looking to get into this industry, especially when you're young, you look to get into the industry and I want to be a wildlife filmmaker. And then, of course, you get there and you realize there are sacrifices, right? I mean, if you want to be a cinematographer on landmark shows, you've got to be traveling. And a lot of the time that is chunks of time that I remember Doug Allen, speaking about how much, and Sophie Darlington, just how much they're away. And that is a sacrifice, right? It's something you choose. And that has to become part of your being, but it is a sacrifice. However you look at it, I don't think anyone goes, "Oh, I love being away from my kids."
No, I mean that side of things is definitely tough. But I mean, you do have a choice to a degree. I mean, it depends what your overheads are. But you certainly can. It's hard, but you can turn shoots down. You can just say, "Look, I've got another shoot already," or whatever. But it's tough because you never know. Like next year might be, so you want that money in the bank and. It's a very difficult dance, but from the wisdom that was taught is that if you don't want to get divorced, don't do over 150 days. Like that's the kind of magic number.
Oh, there you go. That's the magic number. Yeah, I hadn't heard that. Well, now I know.
I mean, it's a lot of time away. If you want to be home more than you're away, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I do my best to be home more than I am away. And I built my now career based on not going away very much and doing more local work. Luckily, I'm in a mountainous area right near Tahoe in the Sierra Nevada, and it's a great place to film. Roger, last thing. Advice. You've given a ton of advice already, which is fantastic, but I'm going to squeeze you for a little bit more. If you're giving advice to someone who's looking to get into this industry, it doesn't really matter what type of thing they're looking to do. But what would you say is the most important thing for them to focus on? When you're at this point, you've got no money, you're lacking direction. You want to be in this industry, but you just don't see an avenue in. What should those people focus on to get into this career?
I mean, it's a tricky question. There's probably a few sort of things I could give, but if I try and, I mean, the bottom line is it's all about relationships. So, assuming that you have the passion and you have the interest and maniacal focus. Okay, you've got to have. You've got to have maniacal focus. You've got to, and I think that, intentionality, I talk about this a lot in my course, but, the intentional cinematographer, why are you doing something? Why are you moving the camera? You can apply that to getting into the industry. So everything you do needs to be intentional. You can't just, I'm going to go here and I'm going to meet with these people and I'm going to try and, make this happen. So I think intentionality is very important. But the critical thing is, I wrote a post about this, about Justin's advice about, rather be the T-boy in the industry you want to be in than the CEO of an industry you don't. So if you've got to go down, and if it's even just doing the humblest of the smallest of thing, just working in a production company, if you can get into a wildlife, filmmaking production company, or for example, if you're a cinematographer, get into a kids hire rental place. You might have a law degree, but if you want to get into, this is what I did. I mean, if you want to get into the industry, you've got to go right to the bottom. Yeah. So I think for me, that is the key, is get into that industry, build relationships with those people, and then just be patient. And that's how, because it's an apprenticeship model. That's how you win in this industry.
That's great advice. Great advice. And I think it doesn't matter how old you are either. If you want to get into this industry, I think it's still really important. I think you said 36 when you decided.
Yeah.
Is that when you made the jump? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was 36. Yeah. And I mean, there's a number of people that I've spoken to, doctors that have used that skill to get into the industry, because obviously having a medic, if you're a doctor and you can go and assist and, it's great. So, yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's very cool. Where can people find you, Roger? How do people find out about your courses? Well, it's still very much kind of work in progress, but I do have on my website, rogerhorrocks.com, there's a little subscribe, email subscribe where you can put in your email, and then I'll keep you updated on the course. I'll probably start off with a kind of a masterclass, more of just an online 90-minute kind of masterclass, like a live thing where, but I'm definitely looking to develop some sort of self-paced based courses as well, which will be online. So yeah, just drop me an email on my website and I'll keep you updated.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I really appreciate it. I know it's late there. You probably want to get some dinner.
Oh, no. It's only 7. It's just after 7, so it's all good.
7. Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's good. Well, hey, fantastic. It was really fun talking to you. I hope we can do it again sometime.
No, definitely. Anytime. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Behind the Wild Lens podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, then please think about leaving a rating and a comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. It's really important to keep these podcasts sustainable and to get new listeners. So I would really, really appreciate it if you could do that. Maybe just give it a star rating. And if you do have something else to add, leave a comment also. That would be fantastic. And also, if you're into wildlife filmmaking, if you want to try and break into the industry, if you're an aspiring wildlife filmmaker, if you're already in the industry and you want to network with other wildlife filmmakers, then head over to jakewillers.com. That's JAKEWILLERS.com and join our free wildlife filmmakers community. We have hundreds of people inside there who are all either in the industry or aspiring to get into the industry. But either way, we're all wildlife filmmakers, and it's a place where we can network, discuss our work, show our work, and collaborate with each other. Head over to jakewillers.com and check out the wildlife filmmakers community.